Ladies and gentlemen, every now and then life puts a woman in a man's path who shakes him to his core, not because she's loud, not because she's doing the most, but because she's different. She carries herself with a certain strength, a certain peace, a certain power that a man can't quite figure out. And that right there terrifies him. See, when a woman ain't like the rest, when she stands on values, on purpose, on self-worth, a man who's used to shortcuts suddenly realizes, oh, I got to show up different this time. And that's where the fear kicks in, because a real woman, a woman who knows who she is, will demand a version of him he hasn't become yet. And that's the truth a lot of fellas struggle with. A woman who truly knows her worth naturally intimidates a man who isn't prepared to elevate himself. And this truth plays out in ways most people never slow down long enough to notice. See, when a woman understands who she is, when she's done the inner work, healed from her past, set standards for her future, and walks with a quiet confidence, she carries an energy that demands respect without her ever saying a word. She doesn't have to raise her voice. She doesn't have to beg for attention. She doesn't have to compete with anyone. Her presence alone announces that she values herself, and when a man encounters that level of self-awareness, it shakes him because it exposes everything he hasn't handled within himself. A man who isn't ready for that kind of woman will often feel conflicted. On one hand, he's drawn to her. Her confidence is magnetic. Her maturity is soothing. Her clarity is refreshing. She stands out from the noise, and that pulls him in. But on the other hand, being around her forces him to confront his own inconsistencies. He realizes very quickly that he cannot half-step with a woman who understands her worth. He can't show up one day and disappear the next. He can't offer excuses where she expects effort. He can't hide behind charm or smooth talk because she sees right through it. She requires consistency, respect, communication, and emotional presence, and those are qualities that only a man who's serious about himself can offer. And that's where the intimidation comes from. It's not that she's too strong. It's not that she's too independent. It's not that she expects too much. The truth is, she simply refuses to tolerate too little. That's what terrifies him. Her standards don't scare him because they're unreasonable. They scare him because they highlight his unreadiness. A woman who knows her worth forces a man to look in the mirror. She holds up a reflection he may not be ready to see. The parts of himself he's neglected, the areas he hasn't grown, the responsibilities he's avoided. She becomes a reminder of the man he could be but hasn't committed to becoming. And deep down, he fears disappointing her because disappointing a woman like that feels like disappointing himself. Her presence asks him a question without saying a word. Are you ready to meet me at the level I'm standing on? And if he's not prepared to elevate, that question feels like pressure. That pressure feels like fear. That fear feels like intimidation. But it's never really about her being too much. It's about him not being enough yet. She stands as a standard, not a threat. Yet to a man who isn't ready, a standard can feel like a mountain he's not equipped to climb. And that's why a woman who knows her worth can unsettle a man who hasn't found his own yet. When you carry yourself with confidence and clarity, a man realizes he can't rely on old habits. He must grow. This fact becomes very real the moment he encounters a woman who isn't operating from insecurity, desperation, or confusion. You're steady, you're intentional, you know what you want, and more importantly, you know what you won't tolerate. And when a woman shows up with that level of certainty, it immediately signals to a man that the same tricks, patterns, shortcuts, and lazy behaviors he may have gotten away with in the past will not work here. A man feels that energy instantly. He can sense when he's dealing with someone who listens carefully, who watches actions more than words, who sees through inconsistencies, and who values her peace too much to entertain chaos. And that realization puts pressure on him, not because you're asking for too much, but because he's used to giving too little. You become a mirror of accountability. You make him aware of the level of man he has to be if he wants a place in your life. And that awareness can be uncomfortable because growth always requires discomfort. When you speak with intention, when you mean what you say and follow through on your own boundaries, it forces him to either rise to meet you or step aside. Men who are insecure or unprepared will often feel overwhelmed by this because it highlights their lack of discipline. He knows you won't be impressed by potential. You want consistency. He knows charm won't distract you. You look for character. He understands that attention isn't enough. You expect effort. And this level of expectation awakens something in a man, responsibility. It makes him realize that if he wants to be in your world, he has to show up differently. He has to be honest. He has to communicate. He has to be reliable. He has to be emotionally present. These are not demands. They are the basics of a healthy relationship. But a man who's been coasting through life, operating on autopilot, may find these basics intimidating because they require him to grow beyond his comfort zone. Your clarity also removes the games. A man can no longer hide behind mixed signals or vague intentions because you catch it quickly. You ask direct questions. You expect direct answers. You don't play along with confusion, you confront it. And confronting it reveals whether he's mature enough to handle a woman who doesn't settle. Confidence in a woman can terrify a man who is used to controlling the narrative. He can't manipulate a woman who already sees her own value. He can't breadcrumb someone who doesn't chase. He can't keep things undefined with someone who knows exactly what she's building in life. Your presence pushes him out of the version of himself that coasts and into the version that commits. But here's the key. Only a man who wants to grow will respond well to that push. A man who fears growth will label you too much, when the reality is that he's simply not enough for where you're headed. Your clarity demands his clarity. Your confidence demands his effort. Your maturity demands his evolution. And that, to an unprepared man, is terrifying. Your standards act as a filter. separating men who want attention from men who want commitment. And this truth becomes powerful the moment you start living it instead of just talking about it. See, when a woman finally understands that her time, energy, and heart are valuable, she stops giving them away freely. She stops entertaining men who show up inconsistently, who only offer pieces of themselves, or who appear when it's convenient and disappear when responsibility shows up. A woman with standards becomes intentional about who she allows into her life, and that level of intention reveals a man's true motives faster than any conversation ever could. A man who only wants attention will quickly become frustrated when he realizes you're not moved by sweet words with no action behind them. He notices that you don't chase him when he pulls back, you don't reward bare minimum effort, and you entertain emotional crumbs. You aren't impressed by late night texts that lead nowhere. You aren't swayed by promises that don't show up in real life. To him, this feels like rejection, but really it's just accountability. Your standards quietly say, if you want me, come correct. And a man who's not ready for that level of consistency will disqualify himself. On the other hand, a man who wants commitment sees your standards as direction, not pressure. He sees them as clarity, not control. Instead of feeling threatened by your boundaries, he feels guided by them. He steps up because he knows exactly what you need, and he respects you enough to meet it. He understands that your standards are not walls meant to keep him out, but guidelines meant to protect your peace. And a man who's serious about your heart will never be intimidated by the boundaries designed to safeguard it. Your standards create separation, but it's a healthy and necessary one. They separate the men who are emotionally available from those who are emotionally absent. They separate the men who are intentional from those who are impulsive. They separate those who want to build something real from those who want temporary attention. Without you ever raising your voice, without you ever having to explain yourself, your standards send a message about the type of love you're ready to give and the type you're no longer willing to accept. But what really terrifies a man who's not ready is the fact that your standards eliminate the gray area. There's no more hiding behind excuses. There's no more dragging things out without direction. There's no more pretending he doesn't know what you want. Your standards force clarity, and clarity is something a man with unclear intentions fears. Because the moment he has to define what he wants, he also has to face what he cannot give. And make no mistake, a woman with standards is rare, not because other women don't want them, but because so many have been conditioned to believe that wanting more makes them difficult. But you've learned that wanting more simply makes you aware, and that awareness is what separates you from the women who settle. Your standards don't just protect your heart. They reveal the hearts of the men around you. Men fear losing a woman who brings peace, maturity, and purpose into their life because she's not the kind of woman you stumble across every day. She's rare, she's grounding, and she carries a presence that shifts a man's entire emotional landscape the moment she steps into his world. A woman like this doesn't bring chaos, confusion, or unnecessary drama. She brings order, she brings clarity. She brings a sense of calm that a man didn't even realize he needed until she gave him a taste of it. And once he experiences that, once he feels the difference between a relationship that drains him and a woman who genuinely adds value to his life, the fear of losing her becomes very real. A peaceful woman is powerful. She doesn't nag for attention. She doesn't beg for effort. She doesn't argue to be heard. She communicates clearly, listens deeply, and chooses her battles with wisdom. That alone intimidates a man who's used to emotional instability, not because she's doing something wrong, but because she refuses to engage in the kind of dysfunction he may be accustomed to. Her peace exposes the chaos he hasn't dealt with. Her maturity highlights the immaturity he's been hiding. Her purpose reminds him of the direction he hasn't found. She becomes a living example of what stability looks like, and that's both comforting and frightening. See, the wrong woman can distract a man from his goals, but the right woman can make him confront them. A purposeful woman doesn't let a man sit in stagnation. She encourages his growth, not by nagging, but by inspiring. Her ambition makes him revisit his own. Her discipline makes him check his habits. Her consistency makes him evaluate his patterns. She doesn't force him to level up. Her presence alone demands it. And for a man who's never truly had that kind of influence in his life, the fear isn't that she'll ask too much. The fear is that he won't be enough. But the deeper fear comes from understanding what it means to lose a woman like this. A peaceful woman leaves a void when she's gone. Her absence feels louder than her presence because everything she brought, the calm, the stability, the kindness, the encouragement, becomes painfully noticeable when it's missing. A man starts to realize that other women don't bring what she brought. The conversations aren't as deep. The connection isn't as effortless. The support isn't as genuine. Suddenly, he finds himself wanting the very peace he once took for granted. A mature woman also doesn't cling. She doesn't chase. She doesn't manipulate a man into staying. She knows her worth, and that alone terrifies him because he can't use fear of abandonment to keep her around. She's not afraid to walk away if the relationship threatens her emotional well-being. Her strength is quiet but undeniable, and that strength forces a man to show up as the best version of himself or risk losing her. The truth is, a woman who brings peace, maturity, and purpose becomes a man's safe place. And once a man knows what that feels like, he fears returning to the world without it. He knows he won't find that combination in just anyone. That's why losing a woman like that isn't just a breakup, it's a wake-up call. Strength, authenticity, and emotional intelligence are what make a woman genuinely different. And this is exactly why a man finds her intimidating, not because she's doing anything extreme, but because she's moving through life with a level of self-awareness and maturity he may not be used to. A woman like this doesn't pretend, doesn't perform, and doesn't shrink herself to fit into anyone's expectations. She shows up as she is honest, grounded, expressive,